Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome to the No Name Music Cast. My name's Tim, and this is
Joy.
And just as we start the episode, Joy and I were having all kinds of conversations before we hit record this evening, none of which we will divulge. So we will go. We will go into music news. Music news. Okay, Joy, what do you have for us?
So, sadly, I have a very devastating thing for anyone that is around my age or anyone who just enjoys an early or late 90s, early 2000s pop tune. Paul from S Club 7 passed away today.
Yeah, you told me earlier on, you sent me a message saying about that. That's incredibly sad. What happened?
So they have not released, as of today, which is April 7th, they haven't released the details, but they say it's not suspicious, was found in his home. And I do know he had been struggling with depression off and on. That's actually why he left the band, I think, initially, if you go back and look up their kind of history. And sadly, because of all the details I'm getting, I want to say he may have had an overdose or suicide. That's purely speculation. For all I know, he had a heart attack working out on his Peloton. I don't know. But with that being said, there's no details that have been released yet, just a very sad everybody doing tributes, and that is not suspicious. He did struggle with depression a lot, and he said that he had to leave. But the worst part is they just announced their reunion tour, and they're supposed to be going on a world tour, and it was a whole thing, and I was very excited. I was hoping they would come to the U.S. Sometimes UK, based artists choose not to come to the U.S., different laws, different things like that, like the Spice Girls did. But yeah, very, very disheartening, very big piece of my childhood. I've always been an S Club 7 fan. I love them in steps. I really don't know how they made it to what from the UK to the US was. But in America, we had this thing called APC Family. And the shows, S Club 7 and Steps, were UK bands who were based off of TV shows. And they were all girls and guys doing silly little antics, and then they'd have the song breaks. And so when I'd come home from school, ABC Family would show Steps, and then they would show S Club 7. And I had to watch it every day when I came home from school. It was like my go-to.
And there is no party like an S Club party, so I understand.
That's what I've heard. I mean, S Club does know how to party.
They do indeed. Well, that's incredibly sad. I hate to hear that. I wonder whether that reunion tour will carry on. I mean, I assume it will. I don't know.
I don't think they've probably made any of those decisions yet because it's so fresh. But hopefully, I mean, for the music state, I hope they do. But on the flip side, I understand this is their friend that they've, worked with for years, and it might be hard for them. I do have another bit of music news that Tim is going to go like, what in the world does that have to do with anything? And I will explain. So there's this band. It is called 5 Seconds of Summer. I have never heard one of their songs. Can't tell you what they look like. Nothing about them. But they have announced they are doing a live album and world tour. Now, the reason I am bringing this up, Tim, is this is a little fun story for everybody. Me and my best friend Molly decided as full-grown adults in their early 30s, we should attempt to watch the Teen Choice Awards. We learned that 5 Seconds of Summer goes by the acronym 5 SOS. So 5 SOS, 5 Seconds of Summer. But attempting to watch the Teen Choice Awards and bring back some, nostalgic, we thought it went wrong because we didn't know anyone who was there. It was like Austin and Kelly, and we're like, who are Austin and Kelly? There was a second where this band, and they kept referring to them as 5 Sauce, won an award. It's 5 Seconds of Summer. And I looked at my best friend and I said, what are 5 sauces? Is that like a ketchup? Molly goes, I don't know. And there you go. There's my story about 5 Seconds of Summer. Don't know anything about them. Their music could be wonderful, but I was thinking they were like in America, we have this sauce. It's called like a Heinz 57. What's the UK equivalent? I've seen it before.
It's like Heinz ketchup, 57 varieties, exactly the same.
Oh, it is. No, there's something in Canada they call it. I don't know. There's another variety that's in Canada. I thought maybe that's what the UK had. Doesn't matter. Heinz 57 is known for having like 57 ingredients. So when I heard 5 sauce, I thought it was like a condiment. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Anyway, Tim, what's your music news?
Okay, well, I have 2 pieces of music news. Now, firstly, Metallica are releasing a new album that's called 72 Seasons. And they're going to be doing a thing on Jimmy Kimmel where they're going to play in Jimmy Kimmel's studio every day for a week, and that's going to be interesting. But what's a cool thing is next week, and we're recording this at the beginning of April, but next week the album comes out. And what they're doing is they're releasing the album in cinemas.
Huh. So, like, how is that going to work?
Well, in fact, I have tickets for it for next week. So there's like an album release party. They're doing it all across the country. Mm-hmm. And they will be playing each of the songs from the album. Each song has a video that goes with it. And then between the songs, they're going to talk about them. So I've been to a few music events in cinemas. I've seen, in fact, Queen and Paul Rogers is an album. It's a concert I saw in the cinema once, which was a concert from Ukraine, actually. And then it was, which one was it? It was Queen at Montreal. That got released in the cinemas, and I went to see that too. So I like the idea of seeing music events in cinemas. I'm not really a cinema buff, as you know, but seeing music events is interesting to me. I mean, I like Metallica. There's some good songs there. I mean, maybe some of their more recent output I haven't really spent a lot of time listening to, but I thought this might be quite cool. Let's go to an album release party in a cinema in the Regal in Roanoke.
I mean, that's a great way. That is such a, I mean, I don't want to call it a cash grab, but that's a great way to bring people in that might not just go out of their way to listen to the album or buy the album. Because I don't want to call it a cash grab. It's a cool concept, but that's a good way to get the audience's attention.
Absolutely. So, the other thing, of course, is that, nobody's buying physical music anymore. Yep. So if you're selling cinema tickets, I mean, you're already ahead.
Mm-hmm. And they're not cheap anymore, so...
Yeah, what did I pay for these tickets? In fact, I have it here. Regal. I can't even remember it. Well, it's $30.18, including fees for 2 tickets. So it's like $15 a pop. I mean, it's fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's not terrible. I was just saying, there's no $5 movies anymore. All right, Tim, what's your other bit of news?
Okay, the other bit of music news is the circus that surrounds Motley Crue. Now, if you've been following Motley Crue, you would know that Vince Neil's singing skills are, you can say skills in inverted commas. Vince Neil's very unique singing style, which accompanies Motley Crue these days. And they've been touring recently, and they supposedly parted ways with their original guitar player, Mick Mars, and everything was very, very good and amicable. And John Five is now playing guitar. And John Five is an amazing guitar player, played with Marilyn Manson, played with Rob Zombie. He does his own solo stuff. He's an absolute virtuoso guitar player, fabulous guitar player. And he's now in Motley Crue. And, good luck to him, because he's probably not part of all this ridiculous drama. Anyhow, so Mick Mars has left Motley Crue, and we all thought it was amicable, but apparently not, because Mick Mars is suing Motley Crue.
Oh, have you seen the details of why he specifically suing them?
Yeah, so Mick Mars has been suffering, I can't even pronounce this, ankylosing spondylitis, AS. It's some kind of bone condition or something.
Oh, it's the one you get in your back. I know exactly what you're talking about. It's the spinal cavity starts narrowing. It's actually genetically in my family, but anyway, continue.
Yeah, so he's suffered for this for a number of years, and touring has become very painful for him. And very, standing on stage for 2 or 3 hours with a guitar in your neck, it's really uncomfortable and painful. So he retired from touring, and we all thought it was amicable, and John Five was going to come in. However, apparently, the minute he was out of the band, they tried to cut him out of royalties. They tried to cut him out of Motley Crue. And they tried to cut him out of the merch and all this kind of stuff. So he decided to sue. And what's interesting is the lawsuit. So first of all, they're accusing Nikki Sixx of gaslighting him by keep telling him how bad his guitar playing was. And poor musicianship and playing the wrong songs and playing in the wrong key and things like that. So this has been a current thing for many years, apparently, where they kept saying, No, Mick, you can't even really play. Oh, that's terrible. What you doing? It's just been an ongoing thing. The other thing that's interesting is he is accusing Motley Crue not only of having bass guitar on a backing track, some of the drums on a backing track, and even some of Vince Neil's vocals on a backing track.
Yeah.
And he
so
said
weird.
that Nikki Sixx, the bass player, did not play a single note on bass during their entire US tour, the last tour he did with them.
Feels like they should be able to prove that if that's true.
Yeah, and as I said, he says also Vince Neil's vocals were also pre-recorded, and even part of Tommy Lee's drums were recordings. So I mean, it's getting rough in the Motley Crue world.
Well, I mean, they are known to be a very motley crew. I was waiting to say that, motley group there. Sorry, I'll be here all week, everybody. But I mean, it feels like if that were true, there would be easy ways to prove that. You know what it is, Tim? So for those who don't know, my career as a whole, and this is what me and Tim were joking about, is I work in HR, which means sometimes I have to do investigations and different things on people. And I'm hearing he said, she said, and people doing this and that, and blah, blah, blah. But it's probably like anything else. The truth is probably somewheres in the middle. You know what I mean, Tim? Like, there's probably a little bit of truth to what each of them are saying. My guess is maybe he's not the greatest player in the world, though I have no idea of this guy's skills. I have literally, Motley Crue is a band that I've listened to, but I've not dove into, and that kind of sense. So he may be an amazing player. I don't know. But there's probably some truth, and maybe he's not the greatest player in the world. And maybe that because he's not the greatest player in the world, they're trying to oust him. And so you have that. It's like when you have somebody who works for you and they work for you for a long time. You have a manager who maybe starts doing things that are negative towards this employee because they've showed skills that aren't what they want. Mm-hmm. And they might even not even know they're doing it consciously. So the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But it'll be interesting to see how the judge goes.
Yeah, I would imagine it will probably get settled out of court or some business like that.
Some large, big number, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I've seen videos of Mick Mars playing. I mean, he's not the greatest guitar player in the world, but he's certainly a competent and fine guitarist.
I said he can't be too bad considering he played, you know what I mean, considering his level. Did he play with any other bands before Motley Crue or anything to your knowledge?
I don't know. I mean, he'd been with Motley Crue for like 40 years or something. Mm-hmm. I did hear, though, that some of the guitar parts on the last few Crue albums were played by John Five. Not all of them, but some of them. And that could have been they were just wanted to kick him out and they just got John Five in to do stuff. Oh, you should get John to do it. He's much better than you. I mean, I don't know.
Well, you just said he's suffering medically. So maybe his guitaring is probably getting to an end. But if that's the truth, then from my mediating HR side, then we have a conversation with him and say, hey, this isn't working. What can we do? Is there a way we can support you? And if not, then you work on a way of working together to, move him away from the group. But you don't just gaslight him and kick him out.
That's true, but you are talking about corporate America world where there's rules and regulations and an HR department. In the world of bands,
I can't help it. I'm an HR manager.
No, I was telling someone the other day, bands are weird. Even local bands are weird. That it's like having a job, but without any HR or payroll or management structure or anything, because often you're in a band and someone decides they're in charge of it and I don't know, it's just,
and there's always one.
It's a weird world. I mean, I was in a band a number of years ago where one of the people in that band decided that it was their band and what they said goes. I mean, it was as much their band as everyone else's in the band. It's just, band world dealings are weird, and especially when you bring in lots of money and a name act, and there's managers involved. It's just
you mean like a Motley Crue level band?
Yeah, a right Motley Crue of people.
I mean, it's literally in the name, Tip. They're a Motley Crue.
Exactly.
Anyway, do you have anything else, Tim, or was that your last piece of music news?
That's my last piece of music news. Okay, so we're going to get into the topic of the episode this week. Now, Joy doesn't know this topic because I did some research on the Facebooks, and I did hide it from you. So unless any of the people who responded to my thread spilled the beans, I don't think you know about this.
I have a theory on what it might be because Tim may have mentioned it in a previous episode, but that's about it.
Yeah, I think you probably know then. So I decided to put it out to the world of the Facebook to give me some unpopular or controversial music opinions. Now, we spoke in a previous episode about how Frank Landry on his Channel 33 RPM video did a whole episode on this about controversial music opinions. And I was looking at his list, and there was some controversial stuff, but I thought, no, that's his creative work. I don't want to take that from him. So I thought, well, let's use the idea and put it out to people that I know. So this week's topic is controversial or unpopular music opinions.
Well, if the conversation me and Tim were having before the podcast, any indication of how this episode would go with this kind of topic, it's going to be a wild one, guys.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say who's had the controversial opinion, and I'm going to give the controversial opinion. I mean, none of this stuff is life or death things. I mean, I don't think the folks are going to mind me mentioning their names. So this is the first one, and it's from a gentleman called Robert Wright, who I know, who's a bass player. And he says Van Halen were a glorified cover band led by a Jim Dandy impersonator until Sammy Hagar made them into a real band. Now, I didn't know who Jim Dandy was.
That's what I was going to ask, and I thought I was dumb.
Yeah. Jim Dandy was the lead singer frontman of a band called Black Oak, Arkansas, who were a band who were around before Van Halen. And if you watch any videos of Black Oak, Arkansas, it's basically David Lee Roth shtick, 100%.
Interesting. How do we know if they knew who he was, though?
I don't know. I mean, because, I don't know where Black Oak, Arkansas were performing, but, they were probably out and about playing or had records out and stuff like that. And, Van Halen, they were probably listening to that stuff. I don't know. But the controversial opinion here is that Van Halen were led by basically somebody copying someone else until Sammy Hagar made them a real band. What's your take on that, Joy?
I don't know. Because I have questions, because I would have to see. So did you watch any of this Jim Dandy's kind of like...
Yeah, I watched a couple of videos of Black Oak, Arkansas, fronted by Jim Dandy. And yes, it is effectively David Lee Roth in the 70s.
But I have a hard time with this, because almost every artist you know of has some form of influence in their career that leads them to want to get in this. And I don't want to take the credit away from Eddie Van Halen, because he's a wonderful, he's a wonderful musician in his own right. And he learned those skills and used those skills. I don't know that I want to say he's ripping off as much as inspiration. And I struggle with that when you see like somebody's like, this song sounds really familiar to this song. And this, I'm like, yeah, it all kind of does. There's only so many chords in the world, right, Tim? Like, and maybe they just drew, if it was a kind of, because like the Jim Dandy person, I was going to ask Tim, I was like, am I missing something? But I'm glad he said it before I did, because I was like, that's supposed to be something I know. Maybe it was just somebody that inspired them. I don't know how I feel about the Sammy Hagar comment. Like,
yeah, but I mean, where do you land? Are you team Hagar or are you team Roth?
I tend to like Hagar, and I know that's controversial.
Well, I will tell you, I discovered Van Halen with Sammy Hagar. The first time I ever saw Van Halen was on the 92 MTV Music Video Awards performing Pound Cake. And For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge was the album that was out. Yeah. And then I got Balance. And then I went back and discovered the earlier catalog. And then I discovered Roth. And I saw Van Halen 4 times. Twice with Sammy and twice with Dave. Though it was like a different band. There were two separate bands, basically, that shared the same members. My preference, I think, is with Sammy, though Dave is the party.
It's true. But the thing is, I mean, I can't drive 55. Great. I tend to fall under the Sammy Hagar realm. I just do, but I don't agree. I don't know. I just find it hard. I understand what the person's trying to say, but I tend to give artists the benefit of the doubt and assume that maybe it's just an influential thing.
Yeah, but I don't know. Certainly their songwriting matured a great deal with Sammy Hagar. It was simplistic, you could say, under Roth, But I mean, Hoffa Teacher and things like that. But I mean, they started introducing keyboards and things, or they had keyboards with Jump and other tracks. But their songwriting became a lot more mature with Sammy Hagar.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think so. And I've actually seen like Sammy Hagar like playing independently and solo and his video stuff. And I feel like I like him. Like I just like him as a person. I don't know.
Yeah, and also the thing about Sammy Hagar, he's like 75 years old and he looks like he's 50.
He really does. Like I like his like little curls in his hair. Why am I always talking about people's hair? I don't know why it comes up on the podcast all the time, but I relate the people I like if I like their hair.
Well, you always have very distinctive hair, so I can see why you would be into people that have cool hair.
It's true. For those who don't know, Tim knows my hair. I always have it pulled up when we do the podcast because like headphones, but I have very big, curly, bouncy hair myself. I dye it all kinds of colors. I love my hair. So I guess that's probably it.
Yeah, it's something that you like and something that you notice. So there we are.
He was very pretty when he was younger, and he's not a bad looking guy now either. Rock on, Sammy.
Like I said, for a gentleman who's in his mid-70s who looks like he looks like an attractive 50-year-old man.
It's true. Yeah, he aged very well, and he has very tan skin, very blonde, beautiful curls and tan skin. I'm not going to say anything negative about him. What's our next controversial topic?
Okay, so this comes from Brian Colburn. He is a fellow podcaster, so shout out to him. And he says, I don't get Radiohead or Coldplay, and damn it, I've tried a lot.
Oh, we're very similar. That is... Okay. Don't come for me, internet, but there's two genres of music, Tim, that I don't get it. Radiohead and Coldplay, that kind of sappy, almost alternative rock. It's whiny to me, and I can't get behind it. And then Snow Patrol's another band like that. Don't get it. The other one that I hate is a word that I can't use, but it's a certain type of rock that I use a very distinct word that starts with a D for the adults out there, rock. And it's like the Hinders of the world and that genre. I do like one song from Buck Cherry, but it's that kind of sound. It could even bleed into that guy who did the, I can't remember his Uncle Cracker. That kind of sound. Those two types of music, I can't play with. How do you feel about them, Tim?
Well, Radiohead for me, it's like whiny student rock. It's like one of those bands that if you say you're into them,
it's a great way to explain it.
Yeah, Radiohead, man, it's the best thing ever. It's so deep. And it's just like dreary. I mean, you and I covered Creep. And if you go on YouTube, you can find a version of Joy and I doing Creep. I'm playing guitar and Joy's singing on it. And I've played Creep in bands and jam nights and stuff like that. And much like Brian Colburn says, he likes Pablo Honey and the Bends. And I mean, I like OK Computer from Radiohead. And it's okay. I mean, it's no Night at the Opera, but it's all right. But I mean, people get so into it, but it's so, I don't know, kind of whiny.
I like Fake Plastic Trees by Radiohead. But that's about it. I mean, it's very... The thing about it is it seems like, when you're watching a very stereotypical movie from the 1990s with college kids and they're super into something and it's super deep and it's supposed to speak to you. But when you listen to it at the surface, you kind of get it. But then when you start diving into it, you're like, this really isn't as deep as I thought it was. That's what it feels like.
Like I said, it's whiny student rock. And as for Coldplay, I've always considered Coldplay to be U2 light. It's like diet U2.
I agree with that. And I do think, what's the lead singer's name? The one that was dating Gwyneth Paltrow,
Chris Martin.
Chris Martin. I think he's actually a good artist. And I kind of like him when I see him as a person. But I have never in my life said, oh my gosh, you know what I want to listen today? Coldplay. Never has that happened, not once.
No, Coldplay would be the sort of music when you're studying hard or you've got a big important work project to do and you put it on low in the background because it's unoffensive. That's
true. And, that Viva La Vie or Yellow or something like that plays in the background. I do know them, and I remember I I can enjoy them in small doses. But that's, I think, the problem with those bands and those songs is the people who are obsessed with that sound, that's all they listen to, and I can't do that. I would lose my mind. I can't.
Yeah, I mean, Coldplay, I like Yellow. Yellow's a good track. But on the whole, I mean, I've got whole albums of theirs. And it's like I said, it's like if you take U2 and all the good stuff that U2 have, the powerful lyrics, the message, the Edge's distinctive guitar sound, Adam Clayton, the drummer, he's fine. And then to take all that away and what you're left with, it's Coldplay.
Well, and I think that their message kind of matches a very light version of what U2 was going for. And I think Chris Martin is very activist. I've never looked this up, but I could be right. I think he's got some activism things going on. So he's playing on that as well. I agree with Brian. I'm just going to say it.
There we are. I tend to agree with him too.
Well, we're controversial, Tim.
Okay, so I have another one here. This is from Kim Goldie. So Kim Goldie is in Australia. I don't know if she's a listener, but she's somebody I've known for a long time. I used to play in a band with her dad, and then she moved to Australia.
All right.
Okay. She's saying that Phil Collins's version of Genesis is better than Peter Gabriel's version of Genesis. She said she doesn't actually like the Peter Gabriel version, but no one she knows seems to agree. What's your take on that?
I think of them as separate entities, but they're separate bands to me. So, like, we love a good Sledgehammer, right, Tim? We've all said that. But I also love a good Phil Collins. I can't think of a song off the top of my head, but Lord knows under any other Sergio Kid I could. I think that that's where I differ from her. I don't know that I think either one is better, but I think of them as separate bands. I don't think of them as the same.
Yeah, because the early Genesis is like very much progressive rock, and it doesn't bear any relation to later Phil Collins era Genesis. Phil Collins era Genesis started off being a little bit progressive, but then when you got into sort of the 80s and the 90s, it was very much mainstream rock pop type stuff.
And I see that. And so for me, yes, they held the same name. And yes, the backing musicians were generally the same. I just think of them as separate bands. So maybe that's controversial. I don't know.
Maybe. Well, the other thing about Phil Collins, I like Phil Collins because, of course, he was on an episode of Miami Vice.
Of course.
Have you ever seen the episode of Miami Vice that he was on?
Yes, because you told me about it. I went and looked it up. And it was amazing and awkward and all the things.
Yeah, so he was a game show host.
It was just like they didn't know what to do with him. And they're like, here you go, Phil. Put you in the episode. I don't understand how it, like, Matt, you know what I mean? Like, why would he happen to be the game show host, Tim?
I don't know. Well, that was the thing with Miami Vice is that they had great celebrity cameos of the day. One episode that I like has Penn Jillette from Penn and Teller in it and Gene Simmons in the same episode. And it was like because I went through a binge of watching Miami Vice because I wasn't allowed to see it when I was a kid because it was on BBC Two. It was on 10 p.m. and I was not allowed to watch it. And kids I went to school with claimed they watched it, but they probably didn't. And as an adult, I decided to watch it, and it's kind of edgy for its day. But I mean, you compare it to modern cinema or modern TV, it's quite tame. But the thing is when you're watching it, if you've never seen it before, and the episode starts, and then it says special guest star, and it'll say special guest star, Little Richard, and you're like, what?
You're also like, well, man, now I know who's going to show up in the episode. No secrecy here.
But of course, the best and the worst cameo appearance in Miami Vice is James Brown.
Oh, yeah. You told me about how awkward that was.
Goodness me. That episode is appalling. You have the Godfather of Soul on an episode. The whole episode is written around him, and it is terrible.
And if you're going to dedicate a whole episode and write it around him, give him some justice, man. Like, seriously. Don't even bother putting him in it if you're going to do that. Yeah,
it is so poor. It's got weird dream sequences in it, and the plot is wishy-washy. And it's all about one of the people that work in the police department with Crockett and Tubbs, and they often go undercover as ladies of the night. And she's undercover as something, and she's supposed to be a cool girl. It's just It's terrible. The plot is just terrible.
Whoever wrote that, Tim would like to have a conversation with you.
Yeah,
he has questions.
Executive producer Michael Mann. Can you come on the podcast and defend yourself?
We have questions. As we know, you obviously listen.
Let me tell you, I'm from what I understand, most of the cast of Miami Vice all listen.
Yes, of course. I should have known. Tim actually called them up directly and gave them the link to the podcast.
Don Johnson, he's always clicking on that link, and he subscribes in Google Podcasts.
I just almost forgot what we were. I was like, why did we go to Miami Vice? And then I remembered it was Phil Collins. Like, I completely spaced it. Was like, how did we get here? It's Friday. We don't normally record on Friday. Me and Tim are extra hyped on Friday evenings.
Yeah, that's correct. We're taking a month off from recording for various reasons. Joy's moving house. I've got stuff going on, so we're recording a lot of episodes all together. So like we always publish episodes on the same day on a Wednesday. So that will not change for the listeners at all. You will always have your weekly episode, and we'll always publish on a Wednesday. But normally we do one a week, or sometimes if we miss a week, we do two a week. But we're doing two a week for a whole month. So Friday isn't a normal day for us.
Buckle up, guys. It's going to get weird. All right. What's our next controversial music statement?
Okay. So I have this from Stephen Ryan. Stephen Ryan is a friend of mine who plays bass. I played with him in Whiskey River. Fantastic musician, fantastic bass player, singer, etc., etc. Okay. So he has three controversial music things he wants to say.
All right.
Firstly, he says Nirvana is overrated and ushered in an era of music that took itself way too seriously and sucked all the fun out of rock and roll.
Oh. I kind of agree. So I understand where he's going with this, because 80s rock was like the funnest rock. And that tends to be like, unless I'm wrong, Tim's favorite genre, era, whatever. 80s is Tim's thing. And there was a very, hair bands are fun. You know what I mean? All these things, I get it. And then you went into a grunge. But do you think, you also have to think that times change, society changes, and there may have been a want and a need society-wise to change the way music was looking. And going into the 90s, they were coming off of, in America at least, and I'm speaking specifically in America, we were coming off of a president who did a lot of things, and there was like AIDS epidemics and just really kind of negative things going on in the world. So maybe music kind of started reflecting the world. And that's why grunge came to be. Or maybe it's just, people like to rebel. Teenagers like to rebel. College kids like to rebel. But I will say, I am not a huge Nirvana fanboy. Don't come for me, internet. I'm just not.
No, I sort of liked it at the time, and I think I've told the story before. I told this story when we had Phil on as a guest, that we had MTV before everybody, and they had "Smells Like Teen Spirit" on heavy rotation. And they were playing it and playing it and playing it and playing it. And then me and my friends used to meet in the music room every lunchtime. So I taped it off the TV. Yeah. And I played it in the music room one lunchtime. I said, guys, listen to this. This is new. I said, it's on MTV. They're playing it all the time. I said, I think this is going to be big. This is great. And they're like, what's that? That's terrible. And I was listening to that. Oh, what are you talking about? And then, 2 months later, everyone is into Nirvana. Oh man, this is the best thing ever. Oh, it smells like Teen Spirit. Yeah, this is a new sound. And it's like, hang on a minute.
I tried to tell you. Tim's like, dang it, nobody listens to me around here.
Yeah, I mean, I think objectively, if you look at some of the other bands which were in the grunge genre, I would say that Nirvana probably were overrated, I think. And people, to use a Joe expression, don't come for me, internet. But I don't know. They were fine. But I don't know. If you compare them to Soundgarden or Alice in Chains or any of those other kind of bands of that time, I would prefer to listen to them over Nirvana.
I love me some Alice in Chains, too. So I'm going to
Yeah, but, Nirvana really, really connected with a lot of people. It really did.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. And I think the legend of Nirvana continues on because we lost Kurt Cobain so early on in his life and career. If Nirvana was still a thing, I don't think it would be they would be revered in the same way that they are now.
What it comes down to is I respect their artistry. I respect the idea that maybe culturally we were having a shift in dynamic because the 80s were a very big time of almost grandiose kind of spending, you know what I mean, economically wise. And then towards the end of the 80s in America, we had a very big downshift after the president. I'm not going to get into his name, but you guys know if you know. And then, we went into a Bill Clinton era. And I just feel like maybe the dynamic shift as a whole in America going from the 80s to the 90s. And there's always these people, and I get it. In music, there are a lot of people who seem to think that the only emotions that matter in music are very deep emotions. And yes, music does ring with me on a deep level. It does. But I also think emotions of happiness and emotions of fun are important too. And so I kind of tend to go between both, but I understand as a whole what he's saying. Rock did change in the 90s, and it hasn't really went back to what you saw in the 80s. But does it have to go back? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's right that it did suck some of the fun out of it because, you see a Poison video or a Warrant video, they're just having the best time. Yes, they got poodle perm hair, and yes, having, bikini-clad models in the video is probably not cool by contemporary standards, but those videos are just, they're having the best time of their life. And then you compare that to the video for, I don't know, Lithium or Heart-Shaped Box or any of that. They just look depressed.
Well, I will say there's this movie, and it's called Grind. It is a skateboarding movie. It is one of my favorite movies from when I was a teenager. And there's a scene in the movie where they're listening to all this kind of grungy rock music. And it's just very almost like they're going on a road trip, and it's the same kind of sound over and over and over again. And the older guy in the van takes the CD out, he chucks it out the window, and he's like, "We are not listening to this anymore." And he instantly puts in Poison, and it goes into Don't Need Nothing But a Good Time. And then I think the next song was Unskinny Bop, and they're like, the people, like, their moods change, and they're so happy, and you see them singing in the van, and it's a really funny moment because he's like, "I can't listen to this anymore." He throws it out the window, and I kind of appreciate it because that would be me.
Yeah, so that kind of 80s rock, it's just feel good time music.
I don't know. I understand what he's saying is controversial in this sense, but I also once again, I think I agree at least to a little bit. There's a little bit of truth there. A little bit of truth.
There we are. Well, Stephen also has another opinion. He has 3 opinions in total. This is the second one. And I tend to agree with this. He says, playing drum loops with rock guitar and a hick accent isn't country. It's just crappy pop music, only worse.
It's so... There is a thing. As someone who likes a little bit of 90s country, a lot of older country, I'm a big fan of. We did a whole episode on it. Tim's well aware. I grew up on that kind of country. But I agree with it to an extent. I do think Shania and Dolly stepped into the pop realm, but they owned it as pop music. They didn't try to market it as country, right? I think that was the difference with them. But there is a lot of music nowadays. When I hear it, I wouldn't necessarily identify it as country if they didn't have that stupid country twang to their voice. And this is coming from someone who was born on the Florida Panhandle, right below Mississippi and Alabama. Tim knows you can hear it in my voice. I live in Southwest Virginia. I'm around this stuff all the time. But that twang, when they sing with it seems fake in certain ways. And then when you hear the song and you're listening to it, and the only difference is the twang, that doesn't really change genres for me. That doesn't really do it. Country music comes from a place of people in the South, like, suffering and speaking up. You know what I mean, Tim?
Yeah, so, like, contemporary country, like you say, it has the twangy accent. It will have a fiddle in it. It will have a banjo in it. But other than that, it's just like pop country. It's just like pop rock.
Yep.
It's what it sounds like. And it's like they add those little flavors in. Like with Christmas music, anything can be Christmas music if you put sleigh bells in it.
Yep.
It's like that. You put the country accent and the fiddle and the banjo, and there you go. Instantly becomes country. And then they have these lyrics that are terrible. They're all going on about dirt roads and buying beer in a gas station and
Do you
grandma's at bingo, and it's just like, come on, it's terrible.
have you that one song that I posted on the Facebook for the podcast page? That stupid song about Applebee's and Bud Light, and there's this stupid country song. It's like what is it? Something about like Applebee. What is it? Lazy like Applebee's on a date night with the barbecue shakes or something, like with the something shakes and the barbecue. And it is like that is a really bad version, but that's how it goes. It's like do 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 do. It's like, oh, fancy like Applebee's on a date night with the something in the Oreo shakes. And it is the worst. I have never heard the lyrics worse. The only other ones that I think could be worse there was this what was it? Oh, what was that song that was that guy who was in country, and my friend thought it was about a horse, but it's not about a horse. And he was okay. So Miley Cyrus's dad, Billy Ray Cyrus, found this guy, and he had that one song that was out. Oh, I've got to Google it, y'all. I have to look it up because I can't.
Give it a goog, Joy. Live on air. Give it a goog.
Oh, God. Oh, what is his name? Billy Ray Cyrus found this person. Oh, what is his? That Little Nas X, Old Town Road. That's the song. Have you ever heard that Old Town Road song, Tim?
Yes, I have.
I would literally rather be waterboarded than have to listen to that song. And I know that's controversial, but I can't stand it. I'm sorry. I've heard, I mean, and I feel bad saying that because I like to respect all artists, but that one was too far for me, Tim. It was just too far. Billy Ray, you're done. You're done here, sir. You're done.
Well, one thing I would like to say, just to turn this conversation completely on its head, and Hannah will not approve of this, but I like a lot of the music of Jason Aldean, and Jason Aldean checks all the boxes we've just spoken about.
Fine, dirt road anthem over here.
We've started doing She's Country in the band, and I really like it. I also like the song Hicktown.
Oh God!
And we say on this podcast, one of our things that we believe in is you like what you like.
You don't have to justify it.
Yeah, and I've just said all the reasons why I hate this so-called bro country, and then I really like Jason Aldean's music.
Always suck though when you have like a rule of thumb. You're like, but then there's one song that you catch yourself singing. You're like, oh, where did that come from?
Well, yeah, it's also like Eminem. I don't like rap. I was saying to someone the other day, rap music doesn't get processed in my brain. I just cannot. It just sounds angry, and I don't like to listen to it. I can maybe do Run DMC, maybe up to like Beastie Boys' License to Ill, and anything from there. And certainly anything that's like contemporary rap, gangster rap, that stuff is just terrible. I have to shut it off. However, that Eminem song, Shake That, I really like that too.
Okay, so mine that is, so I could not stand Justin Bieber when it came out, but I really like the song Sorry, and I like Despacito, so, there you go, everybody. There's mine.
There we are. So you said you don't have to justify. I know, of course, I like Katy Perry, but
But if anyone ever finds me and needs to torture me, just put Old Town Road on, mixed with Sweet Home Alabama, and repeat. I'll give you everything you need to know. If that, or just tell you to kill me and get it over with. If I'm ever dying in the hospital in the UK and they make me listen to the
hospital radio.
Don't you dare put those on. I'll just tell you to take me off the ventilator and let me die. Oh, Lord. Now that I insulted anyone who likes that song, let's move along.
Okay, well, one last one from Stephen Ryan. He said Ace Frehley, the guitar player from Kiss, is quite possibly the most influential guitarist in the genre. Not necessarily the most talented, but arguably the guy that inspired more kids to pick up the guitar than any other rocker.
I wonder why he feels that way. Just because of Kiss's Monumentum, or...
Yeah, I think this is most definitely a US thing.
Okay.
The UK is aware of Kiss, and there are people that love Kiss in the UK, but it's not the cultural phenomenon that it is in the United States.
Yeah.
And certainly here, Kiss that carries more cultural cachet, if you will. So I can see if you was around in the 70s or the early 80s, when Kiss were big, I mean, they're still big now, but, a much bigger force than they are now. You saw the Space Ace. He's got his makeup. He's got his outfit. He's got his Les Paul with the fire that comes out the neck pickup and the smoke that comes out the guitar and all this kind of stuff. I can see why a young person would see that and go, yeah, rock and roll, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, and isn't he known for like having, like you said, the smoke come out of his pickup, and then he also has like some type of pyrotechnic type thing that like spins or something. I don't remember, but yeah, the spaceman. I get it. It's just interesting to me because I guess I never really thought about it. But when you think of a very probably the most in America, the most iconic, just everyone knows them rock band, Kiss is the first thing that comes to mind. Maybe AC/DC followed shortly behind that. Mm-hmm. Maybe. And AC/DC is another band that we could get into with the same kind of thing. But I would say, and a lot of people I know as an American who has a lot of musician friends, because I'm a musician, I love music, all this stuff. You're right. Kiss and probably AC/DC, I would say, are the two most influential bands for people I know who picked up a guitar. If they weren't into country, I would say rock. Those, yeah, I could see that. I hadn't really thought about it that way. But the other one I would put up there is a lot of people I know who picked up a guitar were big into AC/DC.
Mm-hmm. Probably for the same thing, because Angus, it's the visual, isn't it? You got Angus as the schoolboy with he's a short guy and he's got the SG.
And he's got his leg up and he's wailing, yeah.
Yeah, so I can see that. But having sort of been engrossed in US culture and seeing how important Kiss were at that time, I think I would probably tend to agree what Stephen says, but not necessarily for the UK.
For the UK, what would you think would be the equivalent?
It's hard to say because, as we've said before, so much great rock music comes from the UK, but it's not ingrained in the culture like it is here.
So you wouldn't think that, like, even, well, I guess maybe the Beatles, I don't know, because they're not really known for rock. Like, they are a rock band, but, like, they're more poppy. I don't know. Interesting. I never really thought about it in those terms. But yeah, I would say I would go with probably Kiss in the United States, AC/DC. I'm trying to think maybe like a Led Zeppelin type, Pink Floyd type thing were pretty influential too. But yeah, I think they're right. I'll agree with them.
There we go. All right. Well, let's move on to this one. This is from Tony Greathouse. And Tony says, now this is a controversial music opinion.
Okay.
He says the Prince album 1999 and Michael Jackson's Thriller were both released in 1982. 1999 is by far the superior album.
So is this person a very musically talented person? Do you know, like, that wrote this? I'm just curious. Are they a musician?
I don't know whether Tony plays music or writes music, but I do know that he's a music lover and a music aficionado.
Because here's what I'm going to say as a MJ lover. I love me some Michael Jackson. He is one of my all-time, probably top 3 artists, right?
Mm-hmm.
Prince, musically, like his musical skills, and if you have somebody who's big into actually music knowledge, is more talented. Like, they're really going to get me for that statement, Tim. I'm sorry. Michael Jackson could sing. Yes, he could dance. He was a great performer, but actual music skills. And if you listen from the album beginning to end, I see what he's saying with Prince.
Sure. As we've said before, Prince was a musical genius. He played all the instruments, he produced, he wrote, did all that kind of stuff. And Prince had a huge career and was a massive name. But I don't know, Michael Jackson on Thriller. I mean,
I don't know that I would say it was better, but close.
Yeah, Michael Jackson's Thriller. Yes, it's got Michael Jackson's name on it. But I tell you what it is. It's Rod Temperton's songwriting. It is Quincy Jones' production. It's most of Toto playing the instrumentation on it. It's whoever engineered it and stuff like that. So it's a collaboration piece which is released under the name Michael Jackson. And for me, it's probably one of the best albums of the 80s. Whereas 1999, fabulous album, great songs, Prince's musicianship and everything that he does. but as for sort of for like product, if you take away what Prince was capable of and what Michael Jackson was capable of, like just compare those two products, I would prefer Thriller myself.
I think you're right. I'm just saying musically, if you're going down to like music technicality, I would agree. But if I just as an easy listener and I want to listen to an album, I'm always going to probably pick Michael Jackson. Just that the Thriller album's iconic. I mean, I know like Little Red Corvette was on 1999, for example, with Prince. And I love Little Red Corvette. It's a great song, but Michael and Thriller is just so iconic, and it was kind of his breakout moment as an artist, whereas it wasn't really for Prince, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, because I mean, Michael Jackson released Off the Wall, and I mean that was a big album for him, but he was very much in the kind of disco phase there.
I said that's his disco thing for me. I always think of Off the Wall as a disco album.
Yeah, but like Thriller, I mean, he almost wrote the rules of what 80s pop should be.
It's true, and I can't think, I mean, PYT, I can't think of a better pop song than PYT.
Well, apart from the other 10 that are on that album.
Want to be starting something, but I'm just saying, like, iconic pop songs. Because you got what? Beat It, Billie Jean, PYT, Want to Be Starting Something, Human Nature. It's just hit after hit after hit after hit.
Yeah, and then of course, the title track Thriller with the video, which we've covered on here before. I mean, as I said, musicianship, yes, the Prince album is probably the best one of the two. If you just take the product, I have to go with Thriller.
I mean, and the only two songs that I know that maybe a hardcore, like, just like your normal listener who's not really looking into albums like we would, is like The Girl Is Mine is on there. And then there's one other song that I can't think of off the top of my head. But everything else is just hit after hit after. I mean, radio hits too. Like, not just.
Yeah.
And they weren't even singles. Like, these were not the singles. The single was Thriller. But they just became singles because we think of them as singles because they became so popular. I mean, Want to Be Starting Something and PYT may have been singles. I don't know for sure. But, like, I mean, Beat It.
Yeah.
You really can't beat it, Tim.
Yeah, Eddie Van Halen playing guitar on it, Steve Lukather playing bass on it, iconic music video. I mean, it's unbelievable.
I tried to explain why I think he's getting with the Prince thing, but if I had to choose, I'm going Thriller. Sorry, friend who wrote this on the Tim's Facebook. I don't, anyway, if you even listen to the podcast, I don't know. But if you listen to this episode.
What I'm going to do at the end of this thread, when we actually publish this episode, I'm going to put it at the end of the thread so people can listen to our ramblings about their particular opinions. Okay, so let's move on to the next one.
Okay.
This comes from David Tompkins, Tomo, who we know from the Freak Jam.
We do.
And he says, vinyl records are a terrible medium for music. Big, fragile, take up space, can't easily skip songs, have to turn them over, etc. Impracticality outweighs the nostalgia.
I agree with them 110%. And we've talked about how they've made them, even the material now is so bad that half the time if you get a new album, it's all like wonky. And I'm sorry, but I like to be able to skip. And I did grow up in the generation of, the CD player where it said it was anti-skip, and it absolutely never was. Every bump on the school bus, and I heard, but they claimed on my Sony that it was anti-skip. My Britney Spears album didn't make it off of one bus ride. It had a lot of scratches, but this is my Baby One More Time album. I'm still salty about it. But with that being said, I kind of agree. I like the idea of records, and I will say, when my power went out, it was nice to have my vinyl record player because I could play it with my power out because I didn't have, it was like I was able to play it. Anyway, it doesn't matter, guys, because I have one that's battery backup. But that was nice. That was a nice option. And when my internet goes out, occasionally, and, it does happen, it's nice to be able to listen to another medium. But I agree. If we have to pick physical mediums, CDs, man.
I 100%. I had a vinyl journey. I got caught in the vinyl bug, if you will.
I did too.
I bought a load of records, and I don't know. I agree what Tomo says. It says impracticality outweighs the nostalgia, because I have a very nice turntable. I have an incredibly nice cartridge. It actually sounds really good through my system, and some records I have sound amazing. But the fact you can't pause it, the fact you have to flip it over, the fact it's expensive, it's big, it's fragile, it scratches, the pressings. I don't know. I've sold off 75% of my vinyl.
I sold a bunch of mine on Facebook.
Yeah, I sold most of it on mine on eBay. And I've really leaned into CDs. I like the CD medium. I mean, as I said, I've started embracing Spotify recently, but there's something about the CD medium is nostalgic to me because I was there when CDs first came out. And as I've said before, my dad's shop that he worked in had the second CD player in the UK. One went to Harrods, one went to the shop that he worked at. So throughout my entire life, that is my nostalgia because I was there when that happened. And yeah, we had records and stuff when I was a kid, but it is not the same. And yeah, I'll go on record that I will not be buying any more albums, any more vinyl records.
See, and every time I try to look at them, like if I'm walking through something like Barnes and Nobles near me and Tim has a pretty good record section, they're so much more expensive. Like they're ridiculously expensive to buy a record nowadays.
Some of them are almost $50.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but no, it's not worth that much to me. It would have to be a very good album. Like I have, invested in a few, and Tim gave me some of the ones he didn't sell, and I've listened to them a few times. But I mean, it's also just like it's cumbersome as a whole. Like he said, pick the biggest thing you can find to play music on. And mine has one of those little things where you can kind of change the tune. So like, you speed it up or slow it down and it can sound super wonky or super fast or whatever. And then you get right in the medium where most of them are, I think it's like a 16. But every once in a while I accidentally hit that stupid thing and then my album will sound like, I don't know, Donald Duck is singing at me. What is that thing called? I don't even know. Is it the tune, I guess? I don't know. Whatever that thing is.
Register? The thing adjusts the speed?
Is that what it is? Is it adjusting the speed of it?
Yeah, because
of 16's like the middle.
Yeah, it'd be 16. Some record players would have a 16, really old ones would. You have 45, 33, and 78.
Okay, interesting. I don't think I ever realized it was the speed, but now that makes sense. But every once in a while, I hit that stupid thing and my album sounds off.
Yeah.
Moral story.
You would be putting it to 45 is what you would be doing.
Okay. We'll go with Tim, what Tim said. I know if I stick it right in the middle, it's fine for most general albums. And if you look on the album, it'll tell you, like, this is best, whatever. There's, like, a little number sometimes. But anyway, I accidentally hit that occasionally. There
we go. Okay. All right. So this is this opinion, or a controversial opinion, or not controversial opinion, comes from Brandy Royal, which I think is someone that you know.
Yes. I'm very familiar with my twin sister. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
All right, Brady, what you got?
She says, and this is actually something that we talk about all the time. So she says it's okay only to like pop music. You do not need to justify your musical preferences to anyone. And music snobs are annoying.
I agree with her. And me and Brady have talked about this. We've talked about this for years. Me and my twin sister have had this conversation. We are not the kind of people who feel that you have to, not everything has to be a poem. Some things could be Eminem or something like that. And if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. Now, I understand that depending on your mood and your personality and what you want to feel, or maybe if you want to put your emotions into writing your songs, the songs do connect with people. I get it. And that's fine. But sometimes I just want to listen to fun music that makes me want to dance. And that's fine too. It doesn't always have to, it's kind of like what the person who was talking about earlier with the Nirvana thing. It doesn't always have to be that serious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as I've spoken before about my musical journey, growing up, I only ever listened to chart pop, and I still love 80s chart pop as a result. Before I started playing guitar when I was 13. And prior to that, I never listened to any guitar music, really. I was just listening to Capital 95.8 FM, listening to what's his name? Pat and Mick on Capital, where they used to just play pop hits. And
I like how Tim asked me that, like, I'm going to know this guy.
Well, of course. Mick Brown and Pat Sharp, they used to have a chart show thing.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was your Kylie Minogues and all stuff that was in the charts at the time. And I love that stuff, and I still love that stuff now. I mean, I put on like Mel and Kim, which is high-end 80s Stock Aitken and Waterman 80s pop, and I listen to that now, and I still love it. I listened to their album FLM about a week ago, And I can listen to that, and then I can listen to, like, I don't know, Slayer straight after that, and everything works in my brain. It's fine. But she's right. You don't have to justify it. If you just like pop, enjoy your pop. It's whatever you like.
Well, and that's what's great about music, is there's so many different options for all of us. Everybody can find something they like. And that's why I have never in my life met anybody who doesn't like music, at least to some extent. Right, Tim? And if I did, I would be like, man, I'm leaving.
My school friend at primary school, I'm going to name and shame, Stephen Charman, didn't like music.
Wow. I don't
know.
That's something that would never even register with me, how you don't, because there's so many types of music, from anything from polka to, I don't know, Arabian. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
You got to find something, but I guess it just depends. There's probably people out there who are listening. Well, I hope they wouldn't listen to a music podcast because they don't like music. But, or maybe somebody out there listening who doesn't like music that much. But I kind of get, it's kind of like with the Coldplay and the Radiohead thing too. It's like, does it really have to always be that serious? Maybe not.
No. There we go. Well, let's move on to the next one. This comes from my friend and bandmate and musical collaborator and all-round interesting gentleman, Tim Wilson, who I've both played music with many times. I went to his studio recently, actually, and cut some tracks with him, which was a lot of fun. And he says Led Zeppelin was a good band, but not great. Robert Plant sang flat more often than not. Jimmy Page was sloppy and out of tune most of the time. And John Paul Jones was a competent but timid bassist. And then Tomo pipes in and says, same for Jimi Hendrix.
So I feel like Led Zeppelin has become almost like this anomaly of people kind of being like, we need to really relook them, because they've gotten in so much kind of heat for all the stolen songs from the blues artists anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, when Tomo says about Jimi Hendrix did actually play out of tune quite a bit, so I get it. I want to support them in the sense that I feel like they defined a generation, and I don't want to just sit here and rag on them, but I understand what they're saying. And their lead singer definitely was flat a lot, but rock music kind of lends itself to more of the energy than maybe always being perfect with your singing, so kind of hard. I don't know.
Yeah, in fact, I was having this conversation at work the other day. It's like Jimmy Page was an amazing songwriter. His sort of songcraft with chords and arrangements is amazing. And his production skills are beyond compare. You listen to the production of Led Zeppelin on headphones, and he was doing things like you wouldn't believe, back in the late 60s and early 70s. But he is known as being a sloppy guitar player, a sloppy out-of-tune guitar player. But I don't know, like you say, it defines a generation. And Led Zeppelin, I mean, there's people like them in the UK and all, but in the US, they seem to be so ingrained in US culture, probably because they play a Led Zeppelin song. Every fifth song on classic rock radio is some kind of Led Zeppelin song. And it's in films and it's in commercials. It's just so ingrained in US culture, Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember in high school, I wore a Whole Lotta Love t-shirt. Like, I remember specifically wearing that t-shirt. All it said in very little lines, very little letters, said Whole Lotta Love. And if you weren't paying attention, you might not get it, but everybody did because they were so iconic, right? Like, there was no band logo or anything like that. It was just kind of a play on that. And I actually like Robert Plant. If you ever watch him, like, live, have you ever seen him do an interview? Mm-hmm. And they're very funny people. Like, he's hilarious. He kind of seems like maybe he did a little too many drugs, but they're very fun. Like, they're not like the Bee Gees, that's for sure.
No.
Of course, it doesn't take a whole lot. I feel like, though, there's been a big shift in our culture to people have become very judgy towards them. Because, like, remember they got in trouble for the Muddy Waters thing where supposedly they stole that song. And then there's a lot of Black artists that they say they stole music from, which I don't like. I've talked about the whitewashing of America as a whole when it comes to musicians, and I don't think that that's a great thing. But I feel like there's been kind of a shift in the paradigm, whatever that word is, toward paradox, towards kind of being a little anti Led Zeppelin.
I mean, I like the music of Led Zeppelin. I think Tim Wilson is right. Certainly, live recordings suggest that is correct. But I don't know. It so defines a generation. It's hard to say anything too bad about Led Zeppelin.
I feel like it's hard to define them too because they come from a time when rock music was very raw and very like in the moment emotionally. And like, like when you see these bands, like we joke about, Jimi Hendrix and like playing out of tune and different things like that. But they tended to, now I feel like music is almost to a point where we are so obsessed with perfection that if you hear somebody sing off tune because we're so used to hearing auto tune and we're so used to using people using software on their microphones or they're singing loud, right, Tim, to make them sound perfect, that when we go back and we listen to these artists live and they're not perfect, we're like, whoa, they weren't even that great. But like, nobody's perfect when they perform live, Tim. Nobody is. It's never going to happen. But we've gotten to the point now with musicians where they can't even, if they sing off tune once, it's like they get banned from society.
Sure. I mean, like you listen back to the Beatles. I mean, like I said before, I consider Ringo a great drummer, but his timekeeping on some of those tracks is off. And you listen to it objectively and you're like, goodness me, Ringo, catch up. But I don't know. It's of the era.
What are you counting to here, Ringo?
Yeah, it's of the era. It's of the time. And yeah, you're right. If I do a music project on my computer, the very first thing I do is bring up a click track. And then I time everything around the click track. And more or less every band now that records will do the same because it does make editing easier if everything's done to a click. But, that's everyone's mindset now. Let's record something. Let's put a click track down so it's perfect. And you go back and do edits and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I feel like that's something when you listen to these artists live back then, it wasn't as much about making everything perfect as it was about raw emotion in the moment that we see in modern day music.
Absolutely.
There's my hot take, Tim.
There we go. All right. So this is the next controversial music opinion. I will preface this if you don't know what this is. A-level is the equivalent to a GED.
Okay.
All right. So Stu, who was a member of the Freak Jam, says, were the Doors really musical visionaries or just a bunch of acid heads who got lucky? And then Phil Reese pipes in and says, a lot of A-level type poetry over a Hammond organ.
I don't think I agree with this one. I really don't, because I tend to err on the side of, I love the Doors. Now, I will say they do sound like they're on drugs and they do sound, but there's just something. So there's an it factor that I think makes the difference with them being the ones that made it versus the ones who are down here, right, Tim? Like the ones who are below them. And there's something about Jim Morrison's voice and the sound and the way the production quality, I guess, I think made the difference for them.
But do you find his lyrics profound, or they're just like drugs rambling?
Profound? Maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, do you agree with what Phil says? It's like A-level poetry with a Hammond going on.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I mean, I listened to the Doors album the other day as part of the 1001 albums challenge I'm doing with Megan. Our listener Megan in Australia, and there's a track on there called The End, and it's like 8 minutes long or 9 minutes long, and it's just like rambling Jim Morrison and stuff. It's no Light My Fire, let me tell you that.
I mean, that's true. I probably am only thinking from a radio hit standpoint. There's probably a lot of filler I'm taking out of perspective because I'm not listening to the Doors from A to B, but I can't. Riders on the Storm, I can listen to that and you have that on the right headset or you have that on the right like surround sound and it is so perfect, Tim. Like it just hits in all the right ways.
Absolutely. There are some great Doors songs.
Roadhouse Blues, Light My Fire, People Are Strange. Anytime someone says that's strange about Brain, it still goes, People Are Strange. Like, I can't not do it. Now, Just like there's probably a lot of album filler that I'm forgetting, but I think that what I'm getting at though is, and this is what makes the difference, and how this comes to be, I don't know, because there are wonderful musicians all over the world who are better than the people we see every day on our TVs, right?
Sure.
And for some reason, they just don't seem to get to that level or that status. And it's just this it factor that you have to have. You have to know the right people at the right time and hit all the right boxes. So what they're saying about the Doors could be said about a lot of other artists too.
Yeah, there's always the thing. It's like, who's the greatest guitarist in the world? Well, the greatest guitarist in the world is probably a plumber or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And we'll never know. And they, it is what it is. And there's also a lot of artists who are behind the scenes that are like playing in sessions or playing, on albums that you're not even aware of, or producing music and things like that. And they're wonderful musicians, but because they don't have that factor that sells, they never make it. It is what it is. Sorry, guys out there.
Well, okay. Well, let's move on to the next controversial opinion. This comes from John Warren, or as we like to call him, John the Hare. He says he was never a fan of the Guns N' Roses album Appetite for Destruction. He says, Welcome to the Jungle was good. He likes Night Train. They destroyed Paradise City with the ending. And Sweet Child of Mine has been done to death by everyone.
Yes.
And the rest of the album is more swearing than substance.
I agree. I'm
Because I know
sorry.
I think you've said before you're not a huge Guns N' Roses Appetite for Destruction fan.
No, it just doesn't. It doesn't. I think that it's probably because in America, Guns N' Roses has been shoved down my throat since I was born. Maybe. I don't know. They're just one of those bands that I just can't. I like them. I respect them as a band, and I respect the musicry of it. But I can only hear Axl Rose scream at me for so long.
I mean, I agree with Sweet Child of Mine, and my brain cannot accept that ever again. And I've played it so many times in bands, I just can't. This done. But I don't know. I love Appetite for Destruction.
I know you do.
Yeah. This was a very pivotal album for me growing up. And as I've said many times before, I have a very fond memory of being on a coach trip to Germany with Nana Cherry's Raw Like Sushi on one side and Appetite for Destruction on the other. And that was the perfect combination for me. And I don't know, I love that. And I have such good memories of being in the CDT department at school with Appetite for Destruction playing, being in the music room with Appetite for Destruction playing. And I don't know, I respect John's opinion 100%, but I don't know, for me, that was
because that's like your favorite.
Important.
I feel like Appetite for Destruction is what I think of as Tim's favorite Guns N' Roses album. I could be wrong, but I've always thought that.
I recently got both the Use Your Illusion albums in their remixed, remastered form for Christmas. And in fact, I've been working through CDs that are new that I hadn't listened to. And I think it was Use Your Illusion 1, I think I was listening to yesterday because I was still working through those CDs. And there is some great music on there, and I really like it. But Appetite, as with a lot of bands, your first album you put out is the best. And it's because you've gigged that and refined that and played hundreds and hundreds of gigs to get there. And then when you finally get to record it, it is the definitive article. That is like your band because you've honed that material. And then when you get to the second album, you've got to think about it all again. But I don't know. I love Appetite. I respect you, John, the Hair, but I respectfully disagree. Mr.
Brownstone is great, though.
Yeah, that's an interesting song. That's about their heroin addiction.
It's still a good song, regardless of what it's about. And wasn't there Night Train? That's what it's called, right?
Night Train is about that cheap booze that you get in petrol stations.
Wonderful. In America, we get them at gas stations, and ours are called Mad Dog. Ugh.
Yeah, Mad Dog 2020, Wild Irish Rose, Night Train. There's a few others as well, and they're terrible.
Is this a universal thing or is this an American thing? So when you're younger, you're starting to drink and you're trying to figure out who you are as a human and don't know that you don't have to literally put things that taste like ethanol in your body for some reason. There's a thing it's called Mad Dogging someone where you dare them at parties to drink an entire bottle of Mad Dog in America. I suggest it.
I think I've found out since that Mad Dog was sold in the UK, but it wasn't really a thing. People would drink Diamond White, which is like an incredibly cheap cider.
I just remember my friend, we got Mad Dogged at a party and we were young. And Molly looked at me and went, we should not be drinking anything that's the same color as windshield wiper fluid. It was right. We regretted our actions the next day.
Well, if I can recommend a website to you called bumwines.com. If any of our listeners go to bumwines.com, it is a review website which talks about all the magical properties of all of these beverages that we were speaking of. It is hilarious, and I recommend it. It was turned on to me by a former co-worker, and it's just... I revisit it sometimes. It never has new information on it, but it's just the way that it's written is amazing. So they are.
That's
a little
amazing.
tip for you out there, bumwines.com.
I will say, I was not shocked when I found it. So when I came to college, the big thing was those, what are they called? They were like in a can and they have energy drinks mixed with alcohol in them. Four Locos were all the rage. And now as an adult, I found out that there was like literal freaking antifreeze in them.
Sure.
So I'm not like they found actual antifreeze in the drink. They got banned because you shouldn't mix energy drinks with alcohol to begin with. That's just acting for someone to get amped up and punch somebody in the face, right? But
well, you say that, but like a classic in the UK is you have vodka and Red Bull.
Red Bull. That's a classic in America too. Yeah. And then like there's the whole what are those? They're really popular right now. It's like a martini made with like coffee. Oh, what are they called? I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I just anyway, so they got banned. And part of the reason they got banned is apparently in my early 20s I was drinking antifreeze. So when I have to you know those commercials, did you ever call now to get your in America we have a lot of commercials where they're like, did this happen to you as a kid and now you're suffering from blah blah blah, call this number now. That's going to be me. Did you ever drink Four Locos in your early 20s? Call this number now for your money.
But if you ever had a turbo shandy?
Oh God, no, that sounds terrible.
Well, you know what a shandy is. Do you know what a shandy is?
No.
Well, shandy is half beer and half lemonade.
Ooh.
So you would go into a pub. Yeah, I think if you're a kid, you can have a shandy. I think because I seem to remember being a teenager and having a shandy. So it's like half of it is beer and half of it is lemonade. So what people do is they take the spirit of a shandy, but instead of lemonade, they fill it up with Smirnoff Ice, and it's called and it's called a turbo shandy.
Oh, that just sounds like so. In my years of drinking, I have one bit of advice for people. Do not, anytime I ever drink too much, I mix too much sugar with alcohol, it all went downhill. So if that lemonade has a bunch of sugar in it, I say avoid it. Just don't do it. Anyway, all right, what's our next? I have no idea what brought this to this, but what's our next thing?
Okay, this comes from Phil Reese. Phil Reese has a couple of comments. His first comment is the Red Hot Chili Peppers are not good and never have been.
I mean, I agree with that. I'm sorry. I just don't get it. I'm missing something. I like one Red Hot Chili Peppers song.
Yeah, I like Give It Away, maybe Californication, and that's Under the Bridge is all right, but it's overplayed. But I don't get the love for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And as I've said before with Flea, people go on about how amazing Flea is. Yeah, he's a great bass player, but is he the best bass player? No. I mean, like, we put him and Sting side by side. I think Sting's a better bass player. I mean, it's Mark King from Level 42. I don't know. I know it's not really a competition, but he's revered. A lot of people revere him, and I don't get it.
The only song I really like from the Red Hot Chili Peppers is Love Roller Coaster on the Beavis and Butthead Do America album.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, that's
a remake.
Yeah, that's a cover.
Song. But that's like, I like their version of Love Roller Coaster. But other than that, I mean, Californication's great, but I mean, it's almost overplayed for me at this point because, it's a radio hit for sure. But I will say, and if you love the Red Hot Chili Peppers and you've got some recommendations and maybe I missed something, because I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know more than the radio hits. Not really.
Yeah, I mean, there is an era of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which Love Roller Coaster comes from, where it has Dave Navarro playing guitar. Mm-hmm. Dave Navarro is a really good guitar player, very inventive with his chords and the way he does his phrasing, very, very, very good player. And I think he brought a lot to the table in the Chili Peppers, and certainly that Love Roller Coaster suggest that. Alanis Morissette's on Jagged Little Pill, You Ought to Know, the version of that song, which has Flea on bass and the guitar is Dave Navarro, who was in Chili Peppers at the time.
Yeah.
That is superb. I mean, that is just amazing stuff. And then their interplay between them is great. But your average, like, Communal Garden Chili Peppers song, every track of theirs sounds like album filler to me.
I agree. And I like Dave Navarro and I like Jane's Addiction. So maybe maybe he's the reason I like it. I don't know. But it's a lot of songs that sound like album filler. That's the best way I can describe it. Tim's correct. There's no like song that sticks out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing that Phil says, this is an interesting thought. He says most massive bands are overrated, not because they aren't good or move things on, but because no one could be as great as the rhetoric around them. The Beatles and Elvis, for example, were awesome, but they didn't invent all the music.
I think he's right because it's okay. I'll give a great example of something that's not music related where I've seen this play out in the real world. Have you ever had an employee who's left who is a wonderful employee, and every time someone tries to fill their shoes, they're never good enough?
Mm-hmm.
No matter what they do, no matter how much they try, well, you're not this such and such, such and such did it this way because they're everybody's favorite. And
sure.
No matter how much you try to live up to that, you're never going to be Sarah or whatever this person's name is. I think that's what Phil's getting with. No other band is ever going to be the Beatles. And so it does kind of create this kind of rhetoric of like an era around them that's hard for anybody else to ever live up to.
Sure. And I think with a lot of things, like we said, the world's greatest guitar player was probably a plumber. Yeah, Elvis was amazing. The Beatles were amazing. Queen are amazing. All that stuff. But maybe the best rock band ever plays in some pub in the south of England that you've never heard of. But you know, the kind of aura around the name of these big acts, people just assume they're the best.
And that kind of fits in with what I was just saying, the it factor and how you define, these people may. And let's be honest. Yes, the Beatles were amazing, but are they the best musicians in the history of the world? No, not by a long shot. Paul McCartney, maybe because he's multi-talented and can write songs like, off the back of he could be sitting in a Mac, like he could be in a restaurant and in 30 seconds write you a song and hand it to you, it'd be a hit. He seems to be a little bit of a musical genius in his right, but the rest of them, not so much. They're good artists. They were great, as a band, and I love them and everything of that. But were they the best artists ever to have? No, not even a little bit. But what it was is it's the hype, and we all in some way buy into the hype because when someone else likes something that's your friend, you want to listen to it, you want to like it too, generally. But it's also that there's the nostalgia playing in a lot of this. Tim was just saying how me and John were talking about we agree with the Guns N' Roses thing, but for Tim, that's a huge nostalgic moment. For me, when I joke about the Spice Girls, I know they're not the greatest band ever. I know they're not even in the top 40 probably of most people's bands, but there's a nostalgic factor that plays into it that makes me want to listen to them on repeat. So that's also, I think, playing in and feeding this kind of beasts of these artists.
That's true. But then equally, like today, I was listening to a band called Armada of Secrets. Now, they are an unsigned band. They were connected with the Freak Jam world. And when Ian Husbands was doing his Radio Freak Jam, he was playing a lot of their music because, local musicians were presenting original music that could be played on the broadcast.
Yeah.
And because I just got on Spotify, I got the Freak Jamily playlist or got access to it. And Armada of Secrets is on there. That is amazing, amazing music. And it's very unique because it's vocals, drums, and bass, and that's it. And the bass player does amazing stuff, and he's filling this sonic spectrum with his bass playing. And they should be the biggest band because it's great, and it has that nostalgia factor because it takes me back to that lockdown time and the Radio Free Jam time and stuff like that. But yeah, I think their musicianship is superb, but no one's ever going to talk about them because there's 25 people that we used to do Radio Freak Jam with who's only ever heard of them.
But on the flip side, I don't want to discredit any artists who are famous too, because they worked really hard to get there. It's kind of a catch-22.
Yeah.
And we'll never know. But I kind of agree with, I understand what Phil's saying in a sense, but I also think that there's a reason why that these people are so, and a lot for me, I think one of the biggest defining factors in, I think, long-term success of an artist, besides having the it factor, besides just having some talent naturally and but there are, honing their skills and taking the classes and doing all the things on top of having some natural talent. Because everybody just thinks, oh, these musicians are just naturally talented to a point, but you have to hone your skills, you have to practice, you have to get help and supplement and all that. But the biggest thing, and I've said it on the podcast many times, are these artists who tend to do really well. Every album is a little different and playing with different things and different genres, but they do it so well time and time and time again. Elton John's a great example. Madonna's a great example. Michael Jackson, we're just saying, he went from disco to 80s pop. Mm-hmm. Queen has done it so many times over and over and over again. Because what we were saying with the Red Hot Chili Peppers is they sound like album filler because everything's the same. It's very static. Mm-hmm. It's the artists that have the ability to do that kind of where they can play with sounds and manipulate them and still do it well. Because stay in your, lane if you can't do it well. I get it. But those ones who can do it well, I think are the one. That's how they become solidified as those long-term people that Phil's talking about.
Sure.
And I don't know why you guys all need to know that, but that's my theory.
There we are. Do you want to thank me for coming to your TED Talk?
Yeah, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Tim's just sitting there like eyes glassing over. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to close this out. This is the last one.
Okay.
And this comes from Tomo again. And he says, being able to play guitar really, really fast really does make you a better guitar player.
I'll have to leave that one to you, Tim, because I don't. What do you think as the guitar player in the room?
I think that being able to play guitar really fast and accurately is a skill. And it takes a while to be able to play guitar really fast and accurate and have make sure you hit the notes correctly and all that kind of stuff. But I would rather hear B.B. King play one note on Lucille than Yngwie J. Malmsteen play 5 billion notes on the guitar.
That's kind of how I feel too. I think it depends. I think the key is the accuracy. There's the key there. I mean, it is, and it does make a difference. Like when I was first learning to play the ukulele, I was very slow and I play one chord at a time. I wasn't, okay, here's my C, here's my D. Until you get that down, you don't want to speed it up because like Tim's saying, it's not going to work. You have to be able to do that well. But it also just depends on the song and the genre you're playing and all. There's too many factors to make that decision.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to the kind of soulfulness of your playing. I mean, like Eddie Van Halen played super fast with the tapping and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And he had some kind of mojo going where it sounded amazing. Steve Vai, technical genius guitar player, can play at the speed of sound, but there's something about the way he plays his vibrato, his note choice, amazing. But then, like I said, Yngwie J. Malmsteen, it's just, and it just doesn't have that it factor about it.
Yeah, I feel like that's too broad of a brushstroke for me to think that applies to every situation.
Exactly, but I know where he's coming from because that's something that's discussed in the guitar world.
That's why I was like, I'll let Tim explain this because I don't know enough to be an expert, but just generally, I don't know that. I feel like in everything, what generalizing one thing in music is never going to work across the board.
Exactly. Well, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for all of your input. We may do another one of these sort of episodes in the future because it's a lot of fun to dissect that. I did actually make a playlist and I had a song that went along with each of those artists, but I don't know. I preferred the flow we had without interjecting the song. So there you go. I
think that was fun. And this kind of episode, I think that works really well.
There we go. Well, Joy, do you have any words for our listeners before we go?
Just always choose kindness.
Yeah, and I would say to everybody, be kind.
All right. Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.